I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. For me, at least, it is a victory Monday. It was almost a victory Monday for both of us. I was verklempt earlier in the day when Detroit did not pull it out. We will get to all of the games and more. We may even have a special guest join us before the Monday night football game tonight, the barn burner between Cooper Rush and the Dallas Cowboys, and the surprisingly undefeated New York Giants, who promised that Kenny Golladay will be more involved. I'm joined by Dennis. That more involvement, does that mean 4 snaps instead of 2, or what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, maybe they'll actually throw a ball in his general area. You know, it could still only be 2 snaps, but, you know, Daniel Jones tosses one his way. See what you can do, Kenny. I don't know. I feel like he's got a skill set that the rest of the receivers there don't. He's big. You know, while he's probably not as fast as he used to be, he's still, if he's in the right frame of mind, if he's motivated, and he kind of came out and was talking earlier like he was pissed off he was only involved for 2 plays. And Brian Daboll said, well, I'm glad he's mad. He should be mad. He wants to believe he's one of the better receivers, and then he only plays 2 plays because we don't feel like he's given the effort. Give an effort. We'll put you out there. Work harder, we'll play you more.
And it's such a fascinating situation because the reports after last week's game were that he had cleaned out his locker and you thought imminently he was going to be released or traded. And then you hear Brian Daboll talking during the week. Maybe the Giants finally realized what kind of a savage cap hit that would have been. And they're like, no, let's make it work. Well, we're going to get to the games that actually took place. And first up on the schedule was the barn burner of the day, as the Chicago Bears held off the Houston Texans 23-20. Dennis, we saw a lot of feature for Dameon Pierce last week. This week, he got 20 carries, 80 yards, and a touchdown. Burkhead only had 3 carries. Pierce also getting a couple of targets, caught them for 21 yards. Are you starting to feel better? 101 total yards and a touchdown. Are you starting to believe that Pierce might be an RB2 kind of guy?
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with him as a low-end RB2, probably more comfortable as a high-end RB3. I'd like to see him get some of those 5 targets that Burkhead had. So, like, if we could get him, 18 to 20 carries and 4 to 5 targets, I think that bodes really, really well for Dameon Pierce. He didn't have, a great day. 20 carries for 80 yards is right spot on 4 yards per carry. And there's some argument as to whether or not that offensive line is good or bad or kind of just average. I feel like we're going to see him continue to grow, but his ceiling is probably 65% of the snaps and probably in the 20 opportunity range. They're not a team that runs a lot of plays. So I think that if he can get that volume going forward, I definitely want him in my lineup.
Yeah, I think the thing that concerns me, I will agree with you. Of all the offensive lines that exist, they're one of them. I think the thing that concerns me is you're right about Burkhead being seemingly the the preference when they're going to go into passing. So far, the Texans have been remarkably lucky in that they've played all close games. Last year, we saw some games where they got significantly behind. I would like to see what kind of a snap share and workload Pierce gets in a game where the Texans are maybe behind by 20 or something like that, which, maybe it'll never happen, but you never know. On the flip side, another running back to look at, David Montgomery left with injury early on, and then it was Khalil Herbert time. Khalil Herbert had 20 carries, and he made the most of them, 157 yards and 2 touchdowns, almost 8 yards a carry. He also caught 2 passes. For the season now, Dennis, he is averaging 7.3 yards per carry, and he is making a significant case for playing time. Even when Montgomery is healthy, do you think Herbert has earned himself a regular role?
Well, there were rumblings in the offseason that Herbert and Tristan Ebner both were better fits for the Luke Getsy offense. And Herbert has been productive, being the backup. When he gets in, he makes plays. And we saw last year in Nagy's offense, Herbert, started, I think, 3 games, produced really well. I think he's just a pretty good back. Montgomery does some things really, really well. He's got great lateral movement, but doesn't have great, top end speed, doesn't have a lot of burst. Herbert has some of that burst. And so, it showed yesterday what he does. I think what we're headed for is it is a split. I think they start to play more kind of 50-50 ball. We'll see how long Montgomery's out. I haven't looked to see what the early reporting is, but it sounded like he may be out, only a game at most, maybe 2. That being said, that offense has bigger fish to fry than David Montgomery and Justin Herbert.
I mean, maybe they can just wheel them all out there and do the wishbone.
Right.
I do, I think that sound you heard was Herbert's buy low window kind of slamming shut based on the performance now that we've seen over a couple of weeks. But the big thing for me, even going into the season, was Montgomery being in a contract year, and there's been no rumblings that they wanted to keep him long-term. So it looked like Herbert was going to have an opportunity anyway. And I think he's just cementing that with the way he is playing.
So on Sleeper right now, let's see, where is it? Herbert's still only 48% rostered in Sleeper leagues right now.
Yeah.
It's
and if he's not rostered in your league, you need to be going. I don't understand him not being rostered in Dynasty. I'm wondering if they have a lot of best ball and things like that. If you thought he wasn't going to have a big role this year, maybe, but we'll see.
Well, I pulled up our redraft league, and so I'm assuming that these are redraft numbers, and that Sleeper kind of breaks them out based on the type of league that you're pulling the information from.
On our next game, we swing to Tennessee, where the Depression Bowl turned out in favor of the Titans, who were able to hold off the Raiders 24-22. We'll look at the Raiders first. Find somebody that loves you as much as Josh McDaniels apparently loves Mac Hollins. But the Raiders, now the only winless team in the NFL, are they in trouble, Dennis?
I don't think they're in trouble. Maybe they're not going to have the kind of year that a lot of people thought they might have. It's more of what was his name? The GM that's gone. The draft pundit there, but Mike Mayock. Yeah, Mayock. So Mayock and Gruden didn't do a terrific job stocking the cupboard at the offensive line position. And I think that, Josh McDaniels got kind of a checkered head coaching past, to say the least. And so, I'd like to think that at some point they're going to go, man, we went out and we paid a whole bunch of money for this elite wide receiver, and we should really throw him the ball a lot and not use him as a decoy so we can give Mac Hollins 8 catches on 10 targets. Now, Hollins produced. It was great, 158 yards and a touchdown. But, man, Devonte Adams has to have more than 35 yards. I don't know the inefficiency. I didn't watch a lot of that game. At least Adams did get you the touchdown, but man, it was, it's something.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty grim sign. I'm with you after week one, where they only had eyes for Adams. This is a couple of weird games in a row. He did have 10 targets, but only the 5 receptions for 36 yards. You have to figure they've got to find a way to get him going. Didn't even really get Darren Waller going in this one. Before we look at the Titans, we got a quick trade question. Do I trade away Najee Harris for Leonard Fournette and Ken Gainwell? If it's Dynasty, I'm not doing it at all. If it's redraft, I actually might do that because the Steelers offense still looks like it's struggling.
I don't think I would. I still think Najee is better than Harris. I don't think Gainwell is somebody you're going to start consistently. I feel like in redraft, I want to get the best player, and I think that's Najee.
On the Titans side of this game, the Titans come away with a crucial win, but it wasn't always pretty. Dennis, what are you making of this Titans passing game?
Man, you got to love 6 targets for Derrick Henry. Finally, after 18 years, Derrick Henry is getting targets. We're seeing a slide for Ryan Tannehill. He was, I don't want to say he was ran out of Miami, but Miami basically said, hey, you're at your ceiling and we think we can do better. He went to Tennessee. They've had some good years. Robert Woods had a great day, but, Treylon Burks led the team in routes run. He had more routes. So he's going to be getting the opportunity. I like Treylon Burks. He's slowly but surely growing into the position. But they're a Derrick Henry team, and finally this week, we had a Derrick Henry kind of game, and I think that it'll be interesting to see if Henry continues to get targets, because it kind of looked in week one that when it came to the passing game, it was going to be Dontrell Hilliard all the time, and then we look at this game, and Henry gets 6 targets to
second most on the team.
Hilliard's 1 target. He did put up 58 yards on 5 catches to go along with his 85 yards rushing. So I like the concept of that, but I don't know if it's something we're going to see consistently.
Yeah, and I think you hit on it. Outside of Henry, I don't feel confident that they have an offensive identity, especially when it comes to the passing game. Week one, we saw Robert Woods barely involved. It seemed like Treylon Burks was the guy, and Kyle Phillips. I know Phillips has been banged up. They haven't really gotten Westbrook-Ikhine going. This game, they didn't really target Burks much at all. They've never really done much with Austin Hooper. I thought that would be an interesting signing. For me, I think the Titans passing game is one that I'm not looking to start anyone out of until we get a little more clarity, which may never come.
He did pass for 264 yards. He just only popped it into the end zone the one time, and that was to Jeff Swaim.
Yeah, that helps everyone. On to Indianapolis, which was perhaps the most shocking game of the week. I guess it was my hubris for asking you if the Colts had any chance on Friday. But the Indianapolis Colts pull off the upset 20-17 over the Kansas City Chiefs. For the Chiefs, the kind of usual suspects were involved. Not a lot of big analysis there. Not a great day for them. But I wanted to ask you about the Colts. Passing game looked remarkably better. They also remembered that Jonathan Taylor existed and gave him 3 receptions and 21 carries. But the most interesting to me was young tight end Jelani Woods. He only caught 2 passes for 13 yards. Both of them happened to be touchdowns. We've been wondering which tight end might step up for the Colts. Do you have any faith in Woods?
So do you want the tight end that played 42 snaps, the tight end that played 30 snaps, or the tight end that played 16 and just happened to get a couple fluky touchdowns?
Are you saying I'm falling into the week 1 OJ Howard trap all over again?
That's what it looks like. No, I think Woods is going to be fine if you're playing Dynasty. I think it's definitely somebody to keep an eye on, but he's not getting the opportunity. It just happened to be on the field at that point, and it could have been any one of the three tight ends that caught those touchdowns. It just happened to be Woods. He's going to be fine long term, but I think long term is not 2022. He's a dynasty stash, and I couldn't imagine being in a position where I have to start him in a redraft league. 6 weeks from now, if he's leading the tight ends in snaps and getting opportunity, or 8 weeks from now, I'll change my tune. But right now, he's the tight end 3 on that team, and we've seen, time after time after time when a tight end will pop off and catch a couple touchdowns, and I don't know, maybe we call it the OJ Howard. It's screwy. It would have been great, but it was a perfect GPP play in like for DraftKings or FanDuel or something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was the kind of performance the best ball is made of. I'm with you there. On to Miami, where we thought this might be the game of the day, and it was pretty darn good. And that's before you even consider that it gave us the butt punt, which is something I'm sure we're going to be talking about for weeks to come. The Miami Dolphins hold on for a 21-19 win, despite the safety that emerged from that failed punt. I want to look at the Bills first. Is there a lack of a rushing game starting to have an impact on them? You would look at the box score and say Zach Moss had 46 yards on 4 carries, but he had one 43-yard run. For the most part, aside from Josh Allen, they are not finding any success on the ground.
You want to be balanced. You want to have more balance, and it's with Josh Allen being their short yardage and goal line back, it does present some issues. Singletary played 73% of the snaps. Moss played 17. Cook played 12. So they're not playing a lot of snaps, or the backups aren't playing much, and they're not getting much opportunity. It was nice to see Moss produce, and it was one big play and three other carries. We've seen him earlier this year be productive in the passing game. Buffalo has to decide they want to run the ball. When Josh Allen runs it, they can run it. When we've seen Singletary have some limited success, but I think that until they say we're going to commit to the run with a running back, then I don't know that you can really count on that happening. I want them. I want it to happen. We've seen what happens when the quarterback, even one that big and athletically gifted, we saw what happened with Cam Newton. Eventually you get beat up and the injuries will start to wear on you. And as much as I like Josh Allen and as good for fantasy as he is right now, I'd like to see a running back take some of that load off him and have McDermott start to feel comfortable and Dorsey, not melt down and say, hey, let's give the ball to the running back. We'll see. What they're doing is generally working. They dominated just about every facet of the game yesterday in time of possession and yardage and stuff. It just, sometimes that's the breaks.
Yeah, it is still. I'm with you, though. I'm a little curious that they haven't made more of an effort with Singletary, because it seemed like when they let him go at the end of last year, they had some good success and it meant good things for their team, but they just have not really committed to anyone. If you count Reggie Gilliam, they're using at least 4 running backs every game, which is curious. On the flip side for the Dolphins, River Craycraft, a guy that's on their practice squad, has gotten called up a couple weeks in a row. And in both weeks, he's caught a touchdown. And he only had 1 target yesterday, but made the most of it. Some people have wondered if perhaps there is a potential bigger role for him. Now, they changed the rules about the practice squad. If you get called up 3 times, you have to be added to the roster, do you think there's any interest in maybe Craycraft as a deep stash?
Insert the nah, that's bait gif from Mad Max Fury Road. Craycraft has been around in what's he in his fourth year now, third year. I think he's,
maybe more than that. I'd have to look it up because I think he's been on 3 or 4 different teams.
He's basically Trent Sherfield, and Sherfield played I was just looking at it, 63% of the snaps.
But he made the most impactful play of the game, or the biggest impact was made on him anyway.
Yeah. It's Craycraft is, he's a special teams guy. He's a fringe guy. I've got a 16 team, start 22 players, 11 IDP, 10 9 IDP, a kicker, and 12 offensive players. Craycraft is a guy you roster in that league. He's not a guy you roster in the regular, everyday redraft league.
I agree. On to the game that broke both our hearts. The Minnesota Vikings hold on 28-24 over the Detroit Lions. The Lions jumped out to a lead, and they had another big game from Jamal Williams, who got 20 carries to DeAndre Swift 7, had 87 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, also caught a couple of passes. This is the second big game we've seen from him out of 3. Is it time to take Williams a little more seriously as a weekly start?
I think so, especially with Dan Campbell coming out today and saying that they might just rest Swift for the next 2 weeks and let his shoulder get healthy. It's kind of a bummer for people that roster Swift, and Swift is the more talented runner, the more talented receiver, but oftentimes we see sometimes it's not talent that produces. It's just guys that they've got enough talent, and when they get the opportunity, they refuse to let it go. And I think Jamal Williams is kind of turning into that guy. He's gonna make a place for himself. He's great in the locker room. They love him in Detroit. They loved him in Green Bay, and he's scoring fantasy points to the chagrin of my DeAndre Swift shares.
Yeah, I mean, he was a fun player on Hard Knocks too, so I'm kind of happy for him. On the flip side, on Friday, we talked about the difficulty in trusting Osborne or Thielen because they didn't seem to be getting consistently involved. One thing the Lions were able to do was blanket Justin Jefferson, who only had 3 receptions for 14 yards. Meanwhile, Thielen and Osborne each seeing 8 targets. Thielen caught 6 for 61 and a touchdown. Osborne 5 for 73 and a touchdown. After kind of a breakthrough game, are you having more confidence in their role in the passing game?
I don't know that I'm having more confidence in their roles. I think their roles are what they are. They just happen to get open. Jeff Okuda, I saw a tweet earlier today. I was just looking to see if I could find it. The 3 guys that he has covered so far this season have not produced very well. And, what was it? Devonte Smith, I think he shut him out. Who'd they play last week?
Yeah, Devonta Smith, he shut him out. And then they played Washington. I think he held down.
Wasn't it Terry? McLaurin, yeah. He didn't have, like 3 for 46 or something like that. So, Okuda is playing really well, but I think Justin Jefferson is what Justin Jefferson is. And despite the start of the season, he's probably the top dynasty wide receiver in the game. I have faith. And if people are getting squirrely and want to move him, call me up. I'm your guy.
Yeah, I don't think it says much about Jefferson, but I was encouraged to at least see Thielen and Osborne to see Cousins. Remember, they were on the team. I had some hopes for Osborne. I'm a little bit like you. I think the coverage on Jefferson was good, so they went other places. That doesn't seem like a reliable fantasy formula yet. We'll move to New England, where the Baltimore Ravens came in and got a 37-26 win over the Patriots and also beat Mac Jones up. We'll look at the Patriots in a minute here. Lamar Jackson, really good. Also, I don't know if you had it on your bingo card, but J.K. Dobbins returned so that Justice Hill could lead the team in rushing with 60 outside of Lamar Jackson with 60 yards on 6 carries. So that was fun. Any other big takeaways from Baltimore?
If I remember correctly, somebody on this show said that Lamar was going to return to his MVP season form. And he certainly seems to be doing that. He's having a great year. I think that it's not surprising, I guess, that they limited J.K. Dobbins' touches and snaps. He's coming off an injury. They were really conservative getting him back on the field. It's good to see Justice Hill coming back. He was out with an injury last year. The Ravens lost all 3 of their running backs, but I'm not overly concerned that Justice Hill is going to somehow become the starter over J.K. Dobbins.
Who knew that we'd mention Lamar Jackson, and that would be what it took to call Matt back to us?
Did we say it 3 times in the mirror real fast?
You did, unfortunately. I was literally just like laying in bed, getting ready to watch Monday Night Football, and all of a sudden I just appeared here. I wasn't exactly sure what it was. Was it Lamar, Herbert, Tua, Khalil Herbert? There's so many different players, but I'm glad to know which one it was now.
Well, on the Patriots side, Mac Jones didn't have a great day and got beat up, so we'll have to monitor his status. But the passing game seemed to flow through their newest receiver, Devonte Parker. He had 10 targets, catching 5 of them for a ridiculous 156 yards. Matt, I'll start with you. Are you buying Devonte Parker?
What's it going to cost me? I think that's the question.
$350.
Probably your soul.
It's hard to say because it looks like Mac's obviously going to be out for a while. I believe they said it's a high ankle sprain, right? I mean, that's not something that anybody's going to come back from quickly. I would imagine
he got carried to the locker room. That always seems like a great sign.
I saw the pictures of him, like when the camera was on him, he was good, but then like when he thought the camera was off, he showed how much pain he was really in. Like that dude.
It looked like somebody was carrying his leg behind him.
It was not pretty. So I feel for Mac Jones there. I mean, it's hard to say yes. Like I think he's going to be the one. I think Jacoby Myers probably comes back next week, but it's Brian Hoyer. Like, is Brian Hoyer still the destroyer? I don't know. The dude's been in the league forever. Like I don't know.
They didn't guarantee it was Hoyer. I heard somewhere that
could be Bailey Zappi.
Bailey Zappi.
I don't. If that's the case, I don't know that I'd want to. I mean. Anyone, right? You'd want. So, like, I mean, it feels dirty just even saying I'd give up a second for him. I don't know. I'd probably just stay away from him. I mean, we've seen this from Devonte Parker, right? He has these incredible games for like 2 weeks, and then in 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about his 3 catches for 4 yards. So,
yeah, I think it Myers is the guy in that offense. He was out this week, so somebody had to catch the ball, and I think even New England knows we can't just keep throwing it to Nelson Aguilar because nothing good is going to come from that. So Parker has flashed. I think when they, what they need to do is be more confident in their passing game and use more receivers. But what they've shown over the past, season and a half, season and a quarter with Mac is that, they can really only support one wide receiver. I think as Mac continues to develop and the offense eventually gets a real offensive coordinator, that they'll be able to support at least 1.5, 1 3/4 wide receivers as opposed to just one.
Yeah, the person I was looking for them to throw it to is named Hunter Henry. I know his face is on the back of a milk carton. If we can ship that to Bill. Moving on to the Meadowlands, or whatever they call the Giant State or the Jets Stadium now. The Jets fall to the Bengals 27-12. That was one upset I did not get correctly. We've talked about a little bit this season, Dennis, about how the offensive line woes have hampered Joe Burrow in the passing game, but it hasn't been a friend to Joe Mixon either. 12 carries for 24 yards on Sunday. Another middling game. Is it time to worry if you have Mixon in fantasy?
Well, I think eventually it's going to shake itself out. I mean, he's one of the biggest victims of the lousy offensive line play. And there's no substitute for actual live reps. So we're 3 games in. I think that they've got some talented players on the line. And so I think they're just going to continue to get better. They got to win, so they got that monkey off their back and the pressure's off there. So let's just go on and kind of keep going and keep building, one snap at a time approach and play from there. I think Mixon's going to be just fine. I just think he's off to a slow start.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a weird year altogether for fantasy. I don't. It's been unenjoyable from my perspective. I'm sure a lot of other people are having a good time. I am not. So yeah, I think Mixon will turn around, as the Bengals offense will.
For the Jets side, Tyler Conklin, another big game, saw 8 targets, caught all 8 of them for 84 yards. Matt, given the state of tight end position, do you have any interest in Tyler Conklin?
Yes, he should be rostered and started every single week. I mean, we talked a little bit about him this offseason. He was a guy that I was raising up my boards, and I am worried about, obviously, Zach Wilson coming back, and will that affect him, as it does seem like he is doing, obviously, all this with Joe Flacco. Will Zach Wilson target him? But I think Garrett Wilson going down, I don't believe we know exactly how long Garrett Wilson will be out at the moment. Like, that could only be good things for Conklin, as they may try to put
came
more
back
target.
in and actually reappeared yesterday, so I don't know if he'll miss any time. We'll have to see.
But yeah, for right now, as long as Flacco's out there, and even when Wilson comes out, if you want to bench him for a week just to see what he does with Wilson, but I think he should be rostered and started every single week right now.
Yeah, he's the tight end of the roster in New York. He's what, tight end 3, tight end 4 on the season?
Tight end 3 on the season, yeah.
I say, if he's on my roster, I'm riding it. Zach Wilson comes back, I'm going to ride it until I see multiple games in a row of Zach Wilson pretending he doesn't exist.
Next up, we'll move to Washington. Also, let's talk about how disheartening it is that the starting quarterback is returning for a team in the Jets, and that makes us less confident they're going to be good. But for like the 95th time this season, the revenge narrative did not bear any fruit, as the Philadelphia Eagles won 24-8 over Carson Wentz and the Washington Commanders. Dennis, for the Eagles, we saw another huge game for Devonta Smith. We just talked about week 1 being maybe an outlier because we're seeing how good Jeff Okuda has been in coverage. Should Devonta Smith be started with confidence every week?
I'd like to think that he was already being started. I mean, the dude's good. Week 1 was an aberration, and we've seen it with a lot of really good players this year that, they've had a bad game or they've had a bad couple games. But yeah, Devonta Smith definitely, to me, going into the season, it felt like it was a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 combo. But I think Devontae's saying, no, it's a 1A, 1B kind of situation here. He made some big plays. He put up some yardage. And I think that, we know that A.J. Brown produces unlimited volume. That's what he's done his entire career. We haven't seen that from Devonta Smith, but the concern in Philadelphia was with Jalen Hurts, they wouldn't throw the ball enough to support both of them. I think they're doing that just fine. The real loser might actually be Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I don't mean to be mean when I say this. If you sat Devonta Smith, shame on you. I mean, he's an incredible wide receiver.
Shame.
As Dennis mentioned, like Justin Jefferson has a combined 8 fantasy points over the past 2 weeks. Like, even star players have bad weeks. It happens. They're on a offense that at times is not going to be very pass heavy. You're going to get bad weeks from Devonta Smith. Very rarely will you get shut out the way he did in week 1. No reason to be concerned. Start him every single week.
Next up, we will move to Carolina, where apparently the team that Baker Mayfield intended to F up was actually the Saints. He just got that wrong. It wasn't the Browns that he was looking for, because the Panthers finally get off the schneid with a 22-14 win over New Orleans. We'll get more to the Fighting Baker Mayfields in a minute, but Matt, We saw Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry get knocked out in this game, and that opened the door for rookie Chris Olave. 13 targets, caught 9 of them for 147 yards. Is this the beginning of big things for the Ohio State receiver?
I mean, I think so. When he got drafted here, we were all fairly excited about the landing spot. We thought it was going to be good for him. I think it's nothing but, I shouldn't say great news. You don't want to see players get injured, but I don't see why he wouldn't continue to get the volume, even if those guys come back. I mean, Landry was great week 1. I believe Michael Thomas had a pretty good game week 1 too. He caught 2 touchdowns. So like both those guys were good. They're not much in week 2. Like I think Olave is the future. The biggest question and concern you probably have right now with the Saints is how healthy is Jameis going to be? Because we kind of saw old Jameis again, right? Like throws for 300 yards, but multiple interceptions, only 1 touchdown. Like Chris Olave had a day, but at that point, I think it gets back to the old ways of back in the day, we saw this offense only be able to support 1 wide receiver, and it was Michael Thomas. Do we see that again now with the way Winston's playing? If Michael Thomas and Jarvis come back, can you bet on that being Olave every single week?
Well, everybody was healthy last week, and Olave still had 13 targets. He wasn't as efficient. He only had 5 catches on 13 versus 9 catches this week. So I think Olave is kind of establishing himself, and I think Jarvis Landry will be the odd man out there. If Thomas and Olave and Landry are all healthy, I do think that it ends up being a Michael Thomas, Chris Olave offense there.
Also, big ups to Traquan Smith, just waving the middle finger to all fantasy players, coming out with a 105-yard receiving day 1 year after he was literally the only option in New Orleans and couldn't do anything. That tracks. Well, Dennis, if you had Laviska Chenault on your week 3 bingo card, congratulations. We have to talk about him. He kind of made his first splash since being traded from the Jaguars. Caught a 67-yard touchdown pass, ends up with 2 receptions for 90 yards, which you wouldn't say is impressive, except for I saw the Panthers box score, and nothing about their pass offense has been impressive. Is Laviska Chenault possibly going to be a thing?
Maybe. I don't, he didn't get, he's not playing a ton of snaps. I think he was the 4th wide receiver on the team in snaps. He caught a swing pass and had an alley, and he showed that he was fast. All things that we knew. He's definitely got a ways to go before he's fantasy relevant. This game makes him no more fantasy relevant than Jelani Woods or OJ Howard. I mean, it's just he caught 2 passes. Let me see some more. Could it happen? I don't know, but I think people in Carolina are fixing to start clamoring for Sam Darnold.
For more interesting news, just came out, Matt Jones does have a severe high ankle sprain that will require him to have surgery, per sources. Likely to miss at least multiple games, per Adam Schefter. So, I just figured we want to talk about something interesting.
Per Adam Schefter's sources.
I'm curious, severe high, what surgery do they do?
I have no idea. Would cause many to have surgery. I don't know. Maybe it's that tightrope thing. The tightrope
doesn't sound great.
No,
you know who else had 2 receptions for the Panthers is Shi Smith. That passing game is a dumpster fire. On to the next game. The Los Angeles Rams went down to Arizona and got the 20-12 win. Matt, after a week 1 in which Cam Akers was just a rumor, he led the team with 12 carries, got 61 yards and a touchdown. Wasn't incredible on ball security, but are you feeling a little bit more confident about his role in the Rams offense?
Probably, because Henderson didn't look great either. So, and I feel like McVay is very much a hot
Cooper Kupp's just going to start taking all the snaps.
Look, I'd be all for it right now. I have him in a redraft league that I'm likely about to go 0-3 unless Tony Pollard doesn't score 4 points tonight, which I would believe is a fantasy football miracle because it's not going to happen. He's going to score 4 points. I need it. But no, I think Cam Akers for right now, yeah. Sean McVay is going to keep switching back and forth. I don't believe at all in this one running back system that everybody talks about with him. So right now, yes, I will believe in Cam Akers and put him in my lineups.
It's one running back at a time system. He doesn't
Right,
put
yeah.
two.
I
He
think
doesn't
people,
put two of them
people
on the
forget
field.
the at time part. They just did the one running back and then keep moving on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think I am encouraged by Akers' performance coming off the Achilles. He's no James Robinson yet, but he's looking better. We've always had the sense that they don't believe Henderson can carry the load. And so they're always going to try to manage him down and only use him at high volume when they just don't have anybody else. And, that hampers Henderson's productivity. I'm probably, more concerned with why is Ben Skoranek getting 4 targets and Allen Robinson? Well, I guess he got 5. Skoranek had 4 catches for 66. I'm nervous about A-Rob. That's who I'm starting to get nervous about. He just isn't meshing.
Yeah, I mean that is a concern. I will recall though that Robert Woods got off to a pretty painfully slow start last year in the first couple of weeks and then came around. So there's hope. I think with Akers, for me, it feels like Sean McVay wants Akers to succeed, which is probably a good sign for him. On the flip side, Dennis, we talked about it a little bit. Greg Dortch, another big week, saw 10 targets, caught 9 of them for 80 yards. Are you believing in the Dortch?
You know what? Despite the specter of Rondale Moore's draft capital hanging over his head like a guillotine, I think Dortch is going to keep the job when Moore is healthy. He's just putting up the numbers, and with all of the questionable decisions that Cliff Kingsbury has made, I feel like when you've got a player that's producing like this, and then you just are going to take him off the field because you spent, a second round pick on a player that hasn't produced in 2 years or 3 years since he's been on the team. I feel like they'll try to work more back in, but that they're going to keep Dortch getting, his role is going to definitely be reduced when DeAndre Hopkins comes back. It'll be Hopkins and Hollywood, I think, and then Dortch will be the third option. But I think Kyler Murray threw the ball 58 times. Maybe after all these years of them only being perceived as a passing team, now they're like, hey, we're going to chuck it and duck it. Let's roll.
Yeah, I believe in him, and I'm keeping him in my lineups. I think one thing I've learned the past couple of years is regardless if the players are in and out, it seems like these NFL coaches are not moving away from guys that are producing. And when you have a guy like him dorching secondaries – anyways, I think that
be honest, you showed up today just for that, right?
Just for that. I saw Dortch on the sheet. I was like, we're a dad joke of the day. I'm keeping him in. I mean, look, I agree with Dan. Like, does he maybe take a backseat to Rondale Moore? Possibly, but Rondale Moore has not shown us anything that Dortch has in 3 games. Like, I don't think he's going away anytime soon, especially if can't even say his name anymore. Cliff Kingsbury wants to keep his job.
I think we have to call him Fall Off of Cliff Kingsbury from now on too.
Also,
this was my comment in the offseason. They have the perception of being a high volume pass offense, but 58 pass attempts, they had 12 friggin' points. I mean, on to another disappointing game down in South Florida. The Green Bay Packers came in to face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We were hoping for a shootout, and instead we got a 14-12 moderate snoozer. Matt, for the Packers, we've talked about how it can take a long time to get Aaron Rodgers' trust, but here in week 3, Romeo Doubs leads the team in targets with 8 catches, all 8 of them for 73 yards and a touchdown. Are you starting to believe in Doubs?
I am cautiously optimistic. I do want to believe in him. We saw all this preseason, not only him making plays, but he was actually one of the few guys that Aaron Rodgers was talking up along with, obviously, Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard's been okay. He hasn't been anything great, but I think Rodgers realizes he didn't have Devonte Adams on this roster anymore. He can't feed one player, which I'll be honest, I hoped would be Allen Lazard. I had him ranked fairly highly. So I do think that's why he's spreading the ball around, not just to Doves. I believe Tanyan had a pretty good day as well. So Doves, in my opinion, has already jumped Christian Watson. Randall Cobb, I think, is just there to placate to Rodgers. He's very old. I don't think he's going to become anything this year. Neither will Amari Rodgers. So, yeah, I mean, I'd still be hesitant to start him unless you're in some of like the deeper leagues we are in, and I want to see it for a couple more weeks, but I would definitely have him on my rosters because I do think he's going to be the 2 in Green Bay besides Allen Lazard.
I mean, Amari Rodgers is getting outsnapped by Juwan Winfrey.
I don't even know who that is.
I think Amari Rodgers has kind of basically settled in as their special teams returner, which, I mean, might keep him on the team, but you're right. I don't see him being.
Yeah, I think as far as Dubs goes, I mean, somebody has to step up. And this week it was him. And, you know, I agree with Matt. There was talk in the offseason about how he was producing. And he's got the number one ability, and that's availability. You can't develop chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, especially, without being out there getting reps, whether it's in practice, in meetings. You know, that's what Rodgers needs. We see these dinosaur quarterbacks, and they have a way of doing things. And that's where Rodgers sits, and even Brady. And as long as Dubs continues to do these things, have these games, you know, it's not great that he had less than 10 yards per reception. You know, that's not the kind of number you're looking for. But with 8 catches and a touchdown, I guess you'll take that. That's a very productive PPR fantasy game.
On the flip side, we've seen injuries take a toll, but this is now the 3rd game in a row where the Tampa Bay offense has really struggled to kind of get going and put up points. They seem to rally a little bit last week after Mike Evans got ejected. But Dennis, is this offense starting to show signs of age?
Yes. And speaking of low production receptions, I mean, I love that Russell Gage had, what did he have? 12 catches on 13 targets, but at 7.25 yards per reception. I mean, it was like what Deebo Samuel had a negative ADOT last year. I think Gage kind of had a game like that. His long was 15 yards on 12 receptions. Productive,
12 for 87 and a touchdown. So
that's good fantasy points. But not having Godwin, not having Evans, those things, not having Julio, they were down their top 3 wide receivers. You know, I'm not surprised that they lost. I wouldn't have been surprised if Brady pulled it out either. But it was just a situation where they were down a lot of weapons. And, you know, Fournette, the game was close enough. I'm surprised Fournette only rushed the ball 12 times. But, you know, sometimes Brady goes pass happy.
I mean, I had Tom Brady ranked outside the top 12 this year. A lot of it is, I don't even want to say it's age. This offensive line has had a ton of injuries. You're out Godwin. You're out Mike Evans. It's like Tom Brady's back in New England again with no weapons and a really bad offensive line. And like, hey, Tom, go out there and do it again. Only difference is Tom is like 15, 20 years older. I don't think Tampa Bay is just going to be a good offense this year. And I don't think it's necessarily because of Tom. I think he'll be fine once Evans comes back. Hopefully Godwin comes back at some point this year. It's more just that offensive line has got a ton of injuries. And Tom doesn't even look like he's really in it anymore. I mean, like I said, I talked about it this offseason. I felt like the wanting to retire, then come back, all that is, it then takes off all of like preseason. I felt like that was going to affect him, and I really think it is now.
Let me tell you, I've never worried about Brady more than on the drive home listening to his radio show with Jim Gray when he returned from a break and sang the "Every Kiss Begins with K" theme song. That dude's over it. On to what was probably the most shocking result of the weekend. The Jacksonville Jaguars went to Los Angeles and just threw a beatdown on the Chargers, 38-10. We'll get to our worry about the Chargers in a minute, but Matt, James Robinson, he has been strong this season. Comes out 17 carries, 100 yards, looked fast on a 50-yard breakaway touchdown, catches 3 passes. Is he the return from Achilles injury success story we've been waiting for?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if college football fans will get this joke. I don't know how long he was down in Clemson and spending time with Dabo Swinney to be able to, have a miraculous recovery from Achilles tear. But congratulations to him. I don't even think that's. I think the real story is shit. Were we really wrong about Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars? Because
Trevor Lawrence looks incredible too. I mean,
this team looks.
The Jaguars have top 10 fantasy assets at quarterback, running back, and receiver right now.
I just want to know what portal I stepped into and what world I'm on, because this is wow. Congratulations to him, man. Doug Peterson. I'll be the first to admit it. I did not think it was going to work out with Doug Peterson going to Jacksonville. I was wrong. Boy, were we right on how bad Urban Meyer was for the Jaguars, because it looks like a completely different sport they are playing. It is ridiculous how good they look.
I mean, the only way it wouldn't have worked out, I mean, it had to work out when you compare it to what happened last year. I mean, there was no possible way. I mean, if Peterson was there 4 years and went 6-11 all 4 years, it was still better than last year. I mean, that's how bad it was. Robinson looks great. I'm stunned at how good he looks. Now, granted, that 50-yard touchdown, that was a giant hole that he ran through. I mean, the blocking was good. The offensive line,
T-Rich couldn't have hit it.
No, but ETN probably couldn't have hit it either. But it was a big hole, and Robinson bust through it. He looks really good. I'm happy for him.
ETN would have saw it. He would just ran into the back of his lineman on the way to that hole. That's the problem.
I mean, he was probably like Thomas Morstead. He was looking for a butt to run into. On the flip side, Chargers were a pretty trendy preseason pick to do pretty well. Some people had them even in the Super Bowl. They're now 1-2, kind of a ho-hum win over a Raiders team that we've seen not end up being that great. Weren't able to get it done against Kansas City. Didn't even look like they belonged on the field on Sunday. Dennis, is it somewhat the rib injury for Justin Herbert, or are you starting to have a few concerns about the Chargers super team?
No, I think they're going to be fine. I mean, that injury was no joke. I think it changed a lot about their approach to the game. They lost Joey Bosa during the game. The defense is having some injury issues. And then they were down Keenan Allen as well. So, they didn't have a full complement of weapons. So I think the offense is going to be fine. They're explosive. Football is one of those games where often it isn't always the team with the most talent that wins the title. It's the team that stays the healthiest. And that may not bode well for my Chargers v. Rams Super Bowl pick I made in the preseason here, because it certainly looks like the Chargers are not going to be healthy this year.
Fire everybody. That's all I have to say.
I do want to see him when Keenan Allen gets back, because they started pretty strong against the Raiders, and then Allen went out in that game, and I wonder how much it's impacting their passing game. But I thought the Jacksonville Jaguar game might be closer because of Herbert's injury, but there's got to be more going on than just that injury.
I think it's a mixture of a whole bunch of bad things. I mean, they should have beat the Chiefs, and I know what it should have, could have. I get it, but they should have beaten the Chiefs. That was a good game. Maybe it was just Herbert coming back from not even back. I mean, he's dealing with it. Can you just imagine the stress on that dude's mind, knowing that he was about to go get shot up by the same medical team that punctured Tyrod Taylor's lung?
Also, did you hear that they brought in special equipment so they could do imaging to give that shot, because that guy is currently, I don't know, how did the Chargers not change doctors? Yeah. When you have somebody suing them, that's
yeah. If I was Justin Herbert, I'd be like, nah, I'm good. I'll play injured. Like, don't even bring that dude near me. So yeah, I was I'm sure he was freaking out. We'll see. I am definitely worried. There's a lot of rumors that a lot of players are not happy with this coaching staff and everything. It's just typical Chargers, right? They get all this great talent around them, and then something else happens.
Before we get to our next game, we got a trade question. I traded Hollywood Brown and James Robinson for Derrick Henry. Did I win? For me, that would be a no. I would much rather have Hollywood and J-Rob.
Yeah, sorry, Day-Day. I would much rather have Hollywood and J-Rob as well.
I mean,
Dynasty or redraft?
Either format for me.
Hey, I was just trying to,
I feel like that it's 2 starters for 1. So unless you have a team that's just so stocked you can afford to give away 2 starters, you didn't win.
On to a game which turned out to be a little more interesting than maybe we would have thought. The Falcons win 27-23 in Seattle. Matt, I will start with you. Marcus Mariota, Cordero Patterson, Kyle Pitts had a good game. We're seeing some great things from Drake London. The Falcons may not be a wonderful team, but are they fun for fantasy?
They are. And just wait till Desmond Ridder gets in there, man. Everybody's going to be lighting it up. No, I mean,
Drake Mariota's been a decent streamer, I have to say, in some of my super flex leagues.
He has not been bad. Kyle Pitts would have had a much better day if Mariota learns how to throw a touch pass and not sail it 50 yards over the dude's head. Anyways, I mean, London's been good. It was good to see Pitts kind of start getting going in this game. Hopefully more to come from him. I mean, Cordero Patterson. What is it? Never a Scordero? I mean, dude's ridiculous. I should not have faded him because I am paying the price for that. Dude has been amazing. I'm very intrigued to see if he ends up getting traded at some point in time this year because of how good he has been. But yeah, they're definitely a fun team to watch.
My concern with Patterson is that he wore down a lot last year. I don't think he's going to hold up well if he's getting 17 carries a game. Now, on the other side of that, Algier was serviceable with his touches, averaging over 4 yards a carry. He doesn't have anywhere near the type of explosion that Patterson has. Completely different running style. I love I love where the offense is going, and lots of quarterbacks make shitty throws.
Yeah, soon all those shares of Tyler Algier are going to pay off in week 13.
Yeah, I hope so.
Dennis, on the flip side, we're going to turn to a place that's near and dear to your heart, and that is the Seahawks backfield. Ken Walker, there was a lot of enthusiasm when he got drafted. He obviously dealt with the hernia injury preseason, been very slow to get involved. We saw him get 3 carries for 19 yards, 3 receptions for 14 yards. What do you make of Walker and his fantasy prospects this season?
Well, it looks like he's developing into the passing down back for the Seahawks, which would make perfect sense for Pete Carroll because I think he caught 7 passes in 19 years of college football. Now, I think Walker is going to be fine, but Pete Carroll loves him some Rashad Penny. So, Penny with 14 for 66. I think unless Walker has if he goes in for a couple carries and he starts to rip off some big chunks, I think Carroll will keep rotating him out for his guy Penny. It's interesting they let Geno throw the ball 44 times yesterday, but I think Kenneth Walker. I don't think he's going to be a top 24 back this year unless something changes. He's definitely a very low-end flex at this point until we start seeing him get more volume on a consistent basis. But if he starts to get 3, 4, 5, 6 targets, if he starts to pick up targets from DJ Dallas because he has a little more explosiveness, or from Penny Hart, or, Will Dissly or Colby Parkinson, some of those tight ends. I mean, gosh dang. Pete, what's that? 4, 7, 9 targets spread across 3 different tight ends.
Glad they traded for Fant and picked up his 5th-year option.
Yeah. What's even more concerning is they had Kenneth Walker lining up as fullback a bunch. What are we doing? Fire Pete Carroll.
This really just shows you if you went into your 2022 rookie draft really needing a running back, you probably still do.
Right.
Yeah, unfortunately.
All right. Well, on to our final game of the week, which was a Sunday night barn burner. The powerhouse Denver Broncos come away with the 11-10. Yes, it was 11-10 victory over the San Francisco 49ers. Matt, Jimmy G, what a game. Had a fumble on a center snap exchange, had a costly interception, and then at one point just forgot and ran out the back of the end zone. Product of a good defense or a few signs of rust for a guy that didn't get involved this preseason?
Probably both. Denver definitely has a good defense. I definitely think there's some rust there for Jimmy G. I mean, they weren't expecting him to play this year with Lance being out there. Unfortunately, he gets injured. We've seen Jimmy G be good and serviceable. Not going to say all of a sudden he just gone from a guy who's, I mean, we're not talking about him being an elite quarterback, but he was a very good backup. Probably he's a top 32 quarterback in the league, if we're being honest. We didn't go see him from being that to being Dan Orlovsky, which he went and pulled on Sunday night. I think he's going to be fine. Let's just give him a couple weeks.
Yeah, I don't know that I buy the, we didn't think we were going to see him. Because I think he's a professional and he prepares like he's going to be seen.
Have you seen his girlfriend? Are we sure he's preparing for NFL games? Because I wouldn't be. I'm just going to throw that out there.
I have not, but
just going to be honest. Like, let's just,
I will say in his defense, if you watch the play where he accidentally backs up out of the back of the end zone, since they had let 3 free rushers come at him, he was stepping back so he didn't get destroyed. He got hammered a few times last night. Dennis, on the flip side, Denver Broncos have a grand total of 43 points in 3 games. Is this what they meant by let it ride? And what can they do to improve on offense?
Well, I think you have to be patient. That's the first thing. Maybe give the ball to Javonte Williams more. The chemistry between Cortland Sutton and Russ is starting to develop. And I share your angst as it relates to Russ. But don't panic. It's early. So I went and did a little bit of research here. So through 4 games during Russ's career, here's where he stands as fantasy quarterback. Starting with 2012, through 4 games, he was QB 32. He finished as QB 10. In 13, he was QB 18, and he finished as QB 8. In 14, he was QB 18, and he finished as QB 3. 15, QB 9, finished as QB 3. 16, QB 19, finished as QB 11. And 17, holy smokes, through 4 games, he was QB 3, finished as QB 1. In 18, he was QB 20, finished as QB 9. In 19, he was QB 3, finished as QB 4, stunk up the joint. In 20, he was QB 2, went really down the toilet, finished as QB 6. And last year, he was QB 10, and missing 3 games, he finished as QB 19. So all is not lost. He is a notoriously slow starter. He's getting acclimated to the thin air you guys live in up there, a piss poor coach. I think he's going to be just fine. Just got to be patient.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been a slow starter, as Dennis mentioned. I think it's amplified by the fact that he's continually posting cringeworthy TikToks everywhere that's making everybody kind of dislike him more and more. But I do think at the end of the day, he'll be just fine, as will the Broncos offense.
Yeah, was it? So I don't know if you guys saw it. Hackett hired somebody to help him figure out how to manage a game, which is both a good sign of recognizing trouble and also a worrying sign for somebody who'd only coached 2 professional games. Last night, I was heartened that some of the ridiculous penalties like delay of game and stuff got cleaned up. They didn't have to have the hometown fans counting down the play clock, which I thought was probably a better sign. I also think last night the play calling was a little bit better. There was sometimes some gaps in execution. Like, how much differently would we have thought about the game if Jerry Jeudy had actually caught the ball that went over the top to him? I think they've had some near misses. People here have pointed out, and I do kind of remember when Peyton Manning came here, his first 3 games, they were 1-2. And I do remember after like a Monday night game against the Falcons that they lost, I thought, oh my God, Peyton Manning's washed. This entire season is garbage. And they ended up a 13-3 team. So my tendency as a fan is to want to panic. And last night I was repaid by my panic. I screamed at one point in time, forgetting I was cradling our cat, who then put all of her claws into my thigh and took all the skin off my leg. So I think that was as my wife said, I deserved it apparently. So I think that hopefully they will make some signs of going forward. I am encouraged by Cortland Sutton. 10 targets, caught 8 of them for 97 yards. They have some good chemistry. I think if they can get some of the other people going, if we could stop giving the ball to Mr. Fumbles a lot, and remember that Javonte Williams is on our team. I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett spent the offseason with Frank Reich, just that school of forgetting. But
like, somebody just needs to get to the new help me coach and say, hey, when he asks you what to do, say, don't put in Melvin Gordon. Keep Javonte Williams in there. I think it's great, though, that, he wants to do well. And he's like, look, there are some things maybe that I'm not doing good right now. I hate when a first-time coach says I'm going to be the play caller. I think it's the dumbest freaking move out there. But, I also get ego, and that's really all that is. But he was able to set that aside enough to say, I need a get back coach for my ear to tell me, hey, you need to get your head back in the game, call a timeout. Hey, you don't have a timeout, shut up, things like that.
All right. Well, that'll do a wrap for today. Matt and I will be back on Wednesday with a look at tonight's game. Since you were not with us on Friday, Cowboys or Giants?
Giants.
I think I took the Cowboys. I'm pretty sure you did too, Dennis.
I think I did, yeah.
So one of the two of us will be happy on
fighting Saquon Barkley's do it again, baby.
I actually have to start Jake Ferguson tonight.
That might be the roughest thing I've heard all week.
Yeah, I've already lost that game, so it doesn't matter.
Well, that's a wrap for today. We will be back on Wednesday looking at tonight's game and looking ahead at the Thursday night football game, which I'm sure is a game. I forget who's playing. But until then, Dennis, what should the people do?
Go to your favorite podcast platform, subscribe, download, listen, don't listen, just download, rate, review. We love them. 5 stars. Give it to us. Let us have it.